Good evening.
And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on-air host, Sara DiVello, and I'm so excited to welcome tonight debut author Virginia Hartman, live from Washington, D.C., here to give us the inside scoop on her brand new book, The Marsh Queen, out now. Virginia, welcome to Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Tell us about the book.
Sara, thanks so much. The Marsh Queen is about a 36-year-old bird artist at the Smithsonian who has to go back to her hometown to help her mom. And while she's there, she returns to the source of where she learned about birds. But while she's there, she learns a few facts that she didn't know about her father's death. And she's kind of drawn into a mystery, almost against her will, to find out exactly what happened to her dad so long ago.
Ooh, well, there's so much to talk about tonight. I'm a bird nerd, hashtag bird nerd. Let us know what other bird nerds are in the audience. And there's so much to talk about. And this book is racking up such incredible praise and similarities to Where the Crawdads Sing, the swampy marshland, love of nature. So much to get into. We're going to get into every delicious detail. But first, I just want to welcome everyone. So we're broadcasting all over the place today. So no matter where you're watching from, you're in the right place. This is the right time. And whatever questions you have, let us know. Anissa, welcome. She's joining us live from South Carolina. She says, hello, Sara and Virginia. I am so excited to hear more about this stunning book. Anissa, always a pleasure to see your name pop up. Thanks so much for joining us. We have a mystery user in the audience saying, hello, Sara and Virginia. Hey, friend. Thank you for joining us. So, Virginia, let's dive right in. How long did it take you to write this? Why birds? Give us the inside scoop.
Well, I started getting interested in birds. I lived for a short time in Trinidad and in the West Indies, and the birds there are just incredible. There's so many different varieties of birds, so many colors. You have the shore birds, you have the mountain birds. And I'm a Floridian. I'm originally born and raised in Florida. And when I came back to Florida, I realized, wow, these incredible birds have been all around me all this time. And I really didn't notice them until I went far, far away, had my eyes open to the birds. And so I started thinking about what kind of a character would notice birds as closely as I'm taking note of them. And I live here in Washington, D.C., and so I asked if I could get kind of a backstage tour of the Smithsonian and their ornithology department. And that opened my eyes even more. And I interviewed bird artists there, and I interviewed other natural history artists. And I thought, that's who my character has to be, because someone who draws a bird is someone who notices everything. So she notices the birds, but she also notices a lot of other things that go on in her world.
A bird artist. I have never read a book with the lead character of a bird artist, but I always wonder as I look at bird books and try to identify birds that they're hand sketched. And I think that is a very careful person.
Right.
Yay. So that is so fascinating. Melissa joining us from Australia saying, good day, Sara and Virginia. Certainly sounds interesting. And I lived in Australia. Talk about really cool birds. They have some good birds in Australia.
Right.
Melissa, great to have you. Wendy, hi, welcome. Catch a Clue, my favorite handle. Thank you for revealing yourself and for joining us here tonight. Someone else is saying they loved it. Yay. So great to have you. Now, this private backstage tour at the Smithsonian, I didn't know that was a thing. Can just anybody do that?
No, in fact, when I was in Trinidad at this bird center, I met one of the special librarians from the Smithsonian. And so she said, oh, you're working on a story. I can connect you with some people. So I was able to kind of use that entree. And the people in the ornithology department were so welcoming and so friendly and kind of gave me the run of the place. So it was really eye-opening because it's very different in the back hallways of a museum than the beautiful displays that you see. So that was fun.
What was the most startling thing you saw in your secret backstage tour?
The most startling thing were the drawers. They have wide, flat drawers full of bird skins, and it's not like a stuffed bird. It is the actual, organism, but it's just the feathers and the skin. It's a scientific process that they use to carefully kind of preserve the bird. And if it's done properly, it can serve scientists for a generation or more. So but it was kind of startling to kind of like they had all these rows and rows of drawers. And so for instance, you'd see a cardinal. They had juvenile cardinals. They had male cardinals, female cardinals. Every
Were they
stage.
stuffed? What do you mean skin? Is that is it flat like an envelope or a stuff?
It is. And it's kind of tied by the feet and has a label on its feet. So It's a little it's like a stuffed bird, but it doesn't have the stuffing, if that makes sense.
Oh my God, that sounds creepy.
Well, that's what I mean. In one section of the novel, I say, I love this building. I love this museum, but everything in it has a deadness to it. And that makes her want to go out into the swamp where she was raised and draw birds from life. So, ornithologists are they promote living birds, but in order to study birds and preserve birds that maybe will be extinct, they have these samples available to them to study. But that is one, it's kind of a paradox, right? That in the museum, they have all of these specimens that are not living, and then they go on field trips to find the living thing.
Wow. Camilla Trincieri, our 8 p.m. interview. So nice to see you here in the audience. She says she adores birds. I also adore birds. And actually, I am working with International Thriller Writers, ITW, and their special Birds of Prey anthology coming out October 6th. And my favorite bird of prey is the owl. What about you, Virginia? What's your favorite bird? And what's your favorite bird of prey?
Well, I think my favorite bird is the purple gallinule because of its coloring, and it features prominently in the book, of course. The blue heron, of course, in Florida is kind of, I wouldn't say it's ubiquitous, but you do get a sighting here and there, and it's wonderful to see. But when we talk about kind of the living and the dead, I'd say that's a theme that runs through the book, because she's kind of keeps getting these clues about who is dead and why is that person dead, and this is somebody that she loves dearly, her father, and so we switch back and forth between when she's a child and when she's an adult. And when she's a child, the title actually comes from a folk tale that her dad tells her when she's young, about the Queen of the Marsh, the fairy Queen of the Marsh, who has an ability to turn into a blue heron, and has the ability to communicate with the dead, and as a child, she hopes that every time she sees a blue heron, that the heron will take a message from her to her dad after he's gone. So there's a real bond between her, the birds, and her dad who has passed. And so, that her desire to know what happened to her dad is something that she, creates a lot of tension within the novel.
Wow, loving this backstory. Leisha Haney, welcome to the conversation, saying, hello, ladies. Hi, Leisha. Always so nice to see your name pop up. Leisha has a question. She'd like to know, Virginia, who has been your hardest character to write and why?
Okay, that's a good question. The hardest character to write. I think your protagonist is always the hardest character to write. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But I think in this case, what was difficult about Lonnie was we hear her voice throughout. She is the main storyteller, and it's told in the first person present. So, you have to get in what she looks like, how she feels, and what her flaws are, right? And a first person narrator is not going to say, well, I walk down the street and I'm pretty and, I have green eyes, or what, those kinds of things. Like, that's not natural, right? So you have to work those things in, having her seen from different angles by other characters without getting into the heads of the other characters. So you really have to perform a sleight of hand in that respect. And also, she is not perfect, right? She has her little, caveats. And so in order to, I think in a first draft, you are inhabit that character, you see everything from that character's point of view, and therefore it's hard to imagine the flaws that a character might have. But somebody who read the book said, oh, I like how you work in all of the details that we need to know about her, and yet we don't feel like you're doing it. We don't even realize it. We just know things. And so I take that as a compliment, because, she has some anger issues, she has some prejudices, against people in her family, and some preconceived notions. And so, you have to do that through dialogue and through other ways of seeing your character. But I think the main character for me is probably always the most difficult to write.
Leisha, thank you for the great question. And Virginia, thank you for the thought-provoking answer. Let's talk about how long it took you to write this sleight of hand. Let's get into the dirty details.
Well, actually, when I went to the Smithsonian, I was just writing a short story.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know it was going to become a novel. And so when I started lengthening it and liking the characters enough, because I wrote a short story, it was, it wasn't exactly successful. I wouldn't say I came to a conclusion that I loved. I set it aside. I didn't look at it for a very long time. And then, I was working on other things and other stories. And those characters just kept kind of pinging me and saying, we want to come out. So I went back to that story and I put it together first as kind of a collage. So I would write, I didn't write from beginning to end. I would write a piece, and then I'd write another piece, and then another piece, and then they didn't really fit together. So it took a lot of drafts. It took a long time, because I think I was kind of teaching myself how it should go as I went, and learning about the characters with every draft. And so it took years. It took years to really come to a point. And then, of course, once it's accepted by a publisher, you get to work with a fantastic editor who says, part A doesn't quite connect with part C, and I want to see that through line. And then you revise again. So it's a long process.
Leisha saying, thank you so much for answering my questions. Your book sounds like a great read. Susan saying she can't wait to read it. Susan, welcome to the conversation. Recognize you there from Mystery and Thriller Mavens, our private Facebook group, open to all. Be sure to join if you love mysteries. Anissa would like to know, Virginia, which scene in the book was the hardest to write and why? Great question, Anissa.
I think there's a very emotional scene toward the end. I don't want to give any spoilers, but there's tension all throughout the book between Lonnie, the main character, and her mother, Ruth. and her mother is distant, unavailable, cranky. Um, and Lonnie just, doesn't understand why they can't fix their relationship. And for that reason, she doesn't really like to go back to her hometown very much. She's needed there. She helps her mom, but she likes to keep her visits short. And this time she can't keep it short. She has to stay. And so I think the scene where she begins to understand the root of their difficulty was a really tricky scene to write, because I knew what they were going to, find out, but I think making the transitions between all of the parts of it, and then having it become having the right timbre of emotion in the scene was really important and really crucial to the rest of the book. So I think that probably was the most difficult scene, but I'm not going to tell you how it goes, so you can read it and find out.
I love it. Thank you for the wonderful question, Anissa, and the great answer, Virginia. Susan would like to know, what writer has inspired you the most? Virginia, great question, Susan.
Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, I tend to say Anthony Doerr because I love his books. I also am a Maggie O'Farrell completist. I can't wait to read the newest book. I think it's called The Marriage Plot. I think it's called The Marriage Plot. And loved Hamnet. But all of her books, all of her novels before those two have not been historical novels. They've been set in modern times. And I just think I tend to reread her books because I think, how did she do that? And I do the same with Margaret Atwood too. I think when I read Margaret Atwood, I think I'm just so enwrapped with her fiction and her styling and that kind of thing. As far as mysteries, I have to say that I love the Bruno Mysteries by Martin Walker. They're set in the Dordogne region of France. And I love Kate Atkinson's mysteries. I have it's hard to narrow down like who's my favorite author or who do I model myself after, but those are a few. That's just a handful.
Thanks for the great question, Susan. I appreciate that. Susan saying writing is very hard. It's so hard. Alicia would like to know, did you get to choose your title? Yeah, so tell us the story of the title, Virginia.
Right. So as I said, the Marsh Queen is based on, this folk tale that is in a book that Lonnie likes to read and has her father read to her over and over about this fairy queen who can travel between the land of the living and the land of the dead. Of course, when she's a child, that just seems fantastical, right? But then when she does lose her father, it becomes essential. She keeps wishing that she could be that Marsh Queen that turns into a blue heron and flies over to the other world to see the people that she's lost. And also her father, knowing that they have that story that they tell over and over, one day they're canoeing together in the marsh, and we do see this scene from her childhood where he identifies some birds and she, just loves being out there with him. And he says, "You're just such a swamp girl." And she says, "Am I?" And he goes, "No, you know what? You're a marsh queen." So he, it's a playful, affectionate name that he gives her as well.
Leisha, thank you for the great questions. I want to remind y'all the book is out now. So here is the link to grab your copy. So no matter where you're watching from, you can click and order. And the good folks at Murder by the Book will ship it out to you tomorrow. So here is that link. Oh, good question. Have you always wanted to be a writer, Virginia?
That is a good question. Someone else asked me that, and I said, when I was 12, I told someone I am going to be a writer. And then I got distracted and did other things, was in school plays and majored in something else in college. But I think writing has been a through line. I've done it for fun, and I've continued to take classes even when I was doing other things and having other jobs. And then 9 years after I graduated college, I went back to graduate school for a Master's of Fine Arts. And then I really immersed myself, and the people around me were writers, and the people who came to speak were writers. And it was a really inspiring atmosphere. And so since then, I have really kind of made it my goal to, write and publish. And but I think I would have spent more time on it in my developing years if I had just listened to that 12-year-old Virginia Hartman.
It's so interesting because my first book, Where in the Am I, it's a career memoir, and it's about finding what you want to do and making that realization. And then the second step of creating the courage to step into that life. And as I have been traveling around the country for the past 10 years almost, speaking about this and teaching workshops to help people find their work, I have learned so many times, heard so many times, that people know when they're younger, but then we get caught up in the voices of judgment. And maybe that's a parental voice, or maybe it's just a voice in our head, or maybe it's a teacher or someone well-meaning who says, oh, you'll never make a living at that, or that's not realistic, or, some other sort of well-meaning or perhaps not well-meaning, but judgmental thing that sort of quashes that urge. But if we're able to, and sends us in another direction that is more practical or responsible or whatever it is that we're trying to get to, but when we're able to later try to unravel that, we often come back to that little girl or young person, regardless of gender, inside us that knew the answers all along. And it's so interesting to see that over and over and over again. And it's like, what if we were all just supported to follow those dreams in the first place? It's an interesting, and although I do think that the circuitous route ends up enriching that writing. Sure. So it's very interesting to think about. This question, by the way, is from Melissa in Australia. Melissa, where's your adorable little dog picture? Usually you have that sweet little whippet that I love seeing popping up. Leisha saying, thank you for once again answering my question. She loves the cover. Okay, so let's talk about the cover, Virginia. Did you get to be involved in the creation and the choice of it?
Yes. My editor at Gallery Books, part of Simon & Schuster, first said, send me some pictures, send me some ideas, so I kind of threw out things that, and so I sent lots of pictures of marshes and swamps and birds and so on. And then there were a couple of iterations, and this one, I love that it's just a beautiful cover. And the texture is wonderful because she's an artist. So the texture on the top is like drawing paper. And then here, where we have a picture of the water in the marsh, it's smooth and glassy. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful cover. And also in one of the iterations, there was a blue heron, because the blue heron, features so prominently in the title and the story. But they took it off because it was a little busy, right? And I said at the time, well, maybe it can end up on the back of the cover. And they said, maybe, and so we really didn't talk about it again. But then when the cover came out, they put it on the back. Isn't that a gorgeous picture of Willingham?
Yay! The heron made it in.
Yeah. And it's just, the design is great, and everybody who worked on producing this is great. And I just want to acknowledge the designer. Um, and her name is very tiny here, Danielle Mazzella de Bosco.
Yay.
Thank you for making this beautiful cover. But yeah, I was so pleased when I saw it. And then it has kind of like the shadow of the mangroves here in the background of the drawing paper, almost as if the artist has drawn kind of a palimpsest of a tree, and then the paper is ripped looking right here. So if you get a chance, go, just go and touch it. It's really wonderful.
I love textury covers. Susan has a follow-up question to her prior question about your favorite writers.
Yes.
She said, in that list, you mentioned some British writers. She also loves all British writers. Do you feel that you connect more with them?
Not more necessarily, but
I added more. That was my bit. She did not say more.
Oh, no.
I added. I misread that. Do you connect with them, the British writers?
Do I connect with them? I have to say it's not uniform. It's not all British writers, but there are some whose voices just, you trust them, right? And that's true of American writers, of every country. If they can capture a voice and you feel like you're in good hands, I think that's the test of a book that I stick with. Even if, some books you start and you're like disoriented and there are things coming at you and you're not sure and you think I'll give it 100 pages or something. But if you trust that voice, if you trust the writer and to take you where they want you to go, that's important.
It's interesting that you attribute that to trust. Yeah, because there is a relationship between the writer and the reader, and there is that trust. Bleach is saying she loves the back of the cover with that heron on it. Yes, absolutely. So beautiful. Virginia, let's pop into some of your reviews here. So let's kick off with this one from Booklist. With its atmospheric swampland setting, Hartman's debut brings to mind Delia Owens' blockbuster Where the Crawdads Sing, and the mystery itself is on par with Stacy Willingham's A Flicker in the Dark. The fast pace and short chapters keep the story moving for an enjoyable ride. So did you set out to write those short chapters with the intention of keeping the pace flying, or was that from your short story origins, or it just happened to be that way? What's the story?
No, I really value short chapters when I read, and I do think it does keep the pace going, especially if you kind of end with an exclamation point, but you're kind of propelled into wondering what's going to happen next. And that's important to me when I read. I would say the first book that I ever read that did that for me was Beryl Markham's West with the Night. And I go back to that often. She would end that chapter and then, you would just feel like ba-boom. But you'd want to go on to the next section. And Anthony Doerr also does that. He has very short chapters. I mean, his books are big, but lots of white space. And I think in a story that kind of keeps people guessing, short chapters are useful. Now, they're not like uniformly the same number of pages in every chapter. Some chapters require you to stay on that same topic for a little while longer. But for the most part, I think the chapters do keep you reading.
I love a short chapter because it makes it feel like a delicious little snack. And then you think, well, it's like a cheese board. You think I'll just have one more piece or one more olive. And the next thing you know, you've eaten the whole cheese board because it's just so delicious, but it's even more manageable. So I'm here for the short chapters and also the snacks. And so, yeah, that I totally agree. And I love that too. And I haven't read that one that you referenced, so I'll have to check that out. All right, y'all, we have one more minute left. So if anyone has one last question, I think I can fit one in, get it going in the comments. Let's meanwhile pop up this tasty tidbit from this review from Ellen Prentice, saying the setting is distinctive. Lonnie is like a girl detective grown up, and it crackles with trouble and action. I love that review from Ellen Prentice, author of Frida's Song. I want to pop up this one too. This one from Louis Bayard, saying a unique blend of literature and mystery with deft evocations of Florida's flora and sometimes malignant fauna. The Marsh Queen finds a compelling Southern noir niche all its own and marks Virginia Hartman as a writer to watch. Congratulations on that amazing praise. I want to pop the link to order one more time in the comments. So here it is one more time, y'all. Grab your copy tonight. And the good folks at Murder by the Book will send it out tomorrow. Here's that link. It looks like we are out of time. Virginia, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Oh, Camilla Trinchieri is saying, I just want to wish Virginia the very best with her debut book. That's so lovely, Camilla. Thank you so much. Y'all stay with us because at the top of the hour, Camilla Trinchieri will be popping on, give us the inside scoop on Murder on the Vine, her Italian series, which also delicious. So
Thank you.
Virginia, thank you so much for joining us. And we just saying congratulations on all these great reviews. And we will be cheering for the Marsh Queen. Have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.